Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Speedrun News with your host, Sarthe. Today we're going to cover everything that really happened in week 1 of Naxxramas raid release, covering everything from the world first race to bugs, frost resistance, routing, expectations and how the raid is actually panning out, and more. Now, of course, I did want to make another SRN covering the race to world fastest AQ40 speedrun. But I unfortunately did make a bet with my friend that I wouldn't release the video or shave my beard until Salad Bakers did their final AQ40 speedrun. And unfortunately, they're still fishing. All jokes aside, today we will be covering Naxxramas. And with that, let's get right into it.
Oh my god. I am never gonna financially recover from this.
Now, the first thing you might be noticing is that this month's SRN episode is not coming to you directly from the SRN office. Instead, because of COVID and budget cuts, we're coming to you directly from this man-child's bedroom. Our best background that we had to offer is a bunch of shoes. Into the Naxx play, I was able to cover the race to world first with some of the best casters in the World of Warcraft Classic community, including Kargaz, Melderon, I'm Alive, and Duranosaur. And during the race to world first, we did see an astounding victory from the guild Progress, clearing the entire raid in about an hour and 22 minutes with no wipes. They did utilize some very interesting skips, which we will get to in a second, but the world's second clear was actually from the guild Tribe, who had a stream that was actually delayed, so most people covering the race to world first didn't even know that they were this close to winning the record. Onslaught in third place, reaching the Horde and US world first run, and followed by them with Apes and Gussie. All of these guilds did see some struggles within the raid, which I'm sure you guys have met up with yourselves. The first major skip in AQ was used by multiple guilds is the Invisibility Potion skip. This is in the military ward where you can skip the entire top floor of the military ward before Instructor Resuvius, and everyone in your entire raid can do this, so you can skip a lot of time pending how Warcraft logs actually works out, allowing for skips. This is also not the only skip allowed in the raid. There are many others, especially in the Spider Wing, that we didn't see so much this week. The next big play from Progress was utilizing a skip after killing 4 horsemen, which would allow for them to move directly between the different wings from the military wing. So they go underneath the poison water here, cutting all of their HP levels in half, and then they need to wait for the ghouls to move away before they pull the Shade of Naxxramas so that it does not one-shot them. Now, this skip ended up not saving them too much time because of some bad padding and execution, but in the future we can absolutely expect to see this skip be utilized. Next up, what happened to Salad Bakers? This is one of the guilds that was in the favorites to win the race to world first because they did have the current world record from private servers. Unfortunately, very early on in their raid, they pulled multiple Bile Retchers or Reachers and didn't use FAPS or Stunlock and just got absolutely destroyed. Within the first few minutes of their raid, they had actually lost their race to world first. That being said, that was mostly first raid jitters, as the guild went in afterwards, clearing the entirety of the raid in their GDKP, being probably the world's first GDKP with a clean raid and no wipes, killing even Kel'Thuzad, where a warrior went in and bought Wraithblade over all of the mages. Now, how hard was Naxxramas itself? We're actually seeing about 7% of all raids that entered the dungeon being able to full clear the entire raid. Most guilds that can get past Saphiron, the second to last boss, are able to actually kill the last boss, Kel'Thuzad. We're also seeing significantly higher numbers of Alliance guilds being able to full clear the raid, and that is because of the advantages of Paladins for the most part with their mana management and Blessing of Light on Saphiron. And then we will soon start seeing a lot more guilds clear this raid as they do build frost resistance gear. but this raid absolutely was a much harder step up from AQ40, and it also does have a significant stopgap as Saphiron is kind of the hardest boss in the raid, which we've mentioned before. Next up, let's talk swaps. Raid compositions within Naxxramas have changed drastically, from some guilds in the Race to World First having every raider have an entire raid buffed alt right outside of the raid in case they wiped, which is something we saw with Onslaught as a good amount of the raid actually swapped out for different characters. Also, we are seeing ladder halves or different portions of the raid being tackled with different compositions. Especially when you move on to Saph and KT, we're seeing a lot of melee DPS swap out to either ranged DPS or healers. So with that, let's talk Saphiron, one of the hardest bosses in this raid, if not the absolute hardest, where lots of players are swapping off of their main characters to go to healers. This is from Tetsu's POV, who is usually a warrior who had to bring his paladin for the last two bosses of this raid so that the guild can one-shot them. Saphiron is incredibly easier with world buffs, but still a massive challenge, where guilds are running up to 18 or more healers to be able to deal with the frost damage. The aura from this boss does incredible damage every 2 seconds, so the damage output on the entire raid is extremely heavy. Now, this frost bomb is something that we will actually see players in the back using petrification flasks to actually dodge being able to take damage from this if they were late moving to the mechanics. So you can use Flask of Petrification, enabling you to dodge the mechanics here. As well, you can also use Vanish if you are a rogue and Bubble if you are a paladin. Which brings me to our next point, which is actually a quick word from our sponsor, twitch.tv/Sarthe. Just a little tidbit for all of those rogue boys out there, you can actually vanish almost any ability in the game, including the web spray stun from my Exna, which allows you to continue to DPS on this boss while everyone else in your raid group is stunned. There was actual mechanics where Progress used bubbles on paladins to dodge this and be able to heal their tank. You can also vanish this bomb on Saphiron. It is very easy to do if you are a rogue. All you need to do is batch vanish it. So all of the vanish skips, as well as a bunch of guides or tips and tricks for how to get 99s on all of the bosses in Naxx, will come soon on my YouTube channel and will be coming live on my Twitch channel as my guild gets the raid down better. Now that brings us back to Saphiron and the Race to World First and how much damage this actual Frost Aura does. It is no joke. If you do not have world buffs, you will absolutely need a significant amount of frost resistance, especially on your melee, a little bit less on your casters, and your healers do not need to use frost resistance because it actually hurts the raid more than it helps. Now, this brings up the question of how much frost resistance we should run in this raid. And this brings up the question of how good is your raid, what is your raid composition, and how many healers do you have, and how good are people at dodging mechanics, also using things like frost resistance potions. These are very, very essential right now to basically be chain popping so that you don't die during the aerial phase of the boss. Also, if you are world buffed, you can use less frost resistance. Melee need more frost resistance than casters, and healers don't need to use any because they can actually just focus on having more plus healing. Lastly, we are going to talk about some bug fixes that went on this week while we watch a clip from one of the Onslaught runs this week, where one of the mages got a rolling ignite, used a Petri flask while the ignite kept pumping, and did more damage than we've ever seen in the entirety of World of Warcraft Classic. So feel free to watch Supra's DPS on this while I talk about these quick bug fixes. One was the actual bug where using damage modifiers like Darkmoon Fair buff, also things like Murder as a rogue, was causing damage to be increased on you from the Frost Aura on Saphiron. This has been patched, so you don't have to worry so much about this. And another bug is that there was a spot on Hygen where you can stand and not have to do the Hygen dance. This is a spot that was known by most of the top guilds before they ran their actual race to world first spot, but if they use that, it might disqualify them. This has officially been patched already. So this is another thing that you will not be able to utilize, and you just have to do the Hygen safety dance. And that pretty much sums things up for this month's episode of Speedrun News. I will catch you guys all next month after we see our first real runs of speedruns with Darkmoon Fair buff for everybody. Congratulations again on Progress's world first clear, and everyone, good luck out there. Have fun clearing this raid, and I'll see you all on the next one.